Yeah, I'll react to that, sure. Hello, guys. Why were the Gallipoli landings so disastrous? I've kind of been filming one video after another. Is that one already done? I need a new chair. I'm getting a new chair. Merry Christmas, guys. Happy December. So let's just get into it. All right, do all the things. My name's Connor. I like to do stuff. Why were the Gallipoli landings so disastrous? History hit. I've been binging it. Preemptive like. Let's go. Anzac Day. If you aren't ready to learn, there's the door.
Welcome to History Hit. I'm on the banks of the Dardanelles. This is where Europe meets Asia in Turkey. This narrow stretch of water. This has been one of the great arteries of history. This is where history has happened for thousands of years. 4,000 years ago, men in ships landed just up there, the city of Troy, and got involved in a long and terrible siege, much longer than they were expecting. 100 years ago, this month, we're commemorating another terrible siege where men landed here in ships and were involved in a brutal stalemate, the Gallipoli campaign. In 1915, the war on the Western Front was
I just want to make sure you guys can hear it, all right?
Going badly, and Winston Churchill, among others in the West, thought
sorry,
they could
I'll react to
here in
that,
ships
sure.
and were involved in a brutal stalemate, the Gallipoli.
Terrible timing.
Hello, gentlemen.
It is good, though, because that's me uploading another video. Really sorry about that timing. Okay.
Terrible
Go.
siege where men landed here in ships and were involved in a brutal stalemate, the Gallipoli campaign. In 1915, the war on the Western Front was going badly, and Winston Churchill, among others in the West, thought that they could shake things up. They could knock Turkey out of the war by sending a naval fleet through the Dardanelles here, that way to Constantinople, now Istanbul, the capital of the Turkish Empire. Big battleships up there would knock Turkey out of the war, open a new front against Germany and Austria, and open up a vital supply route to Russia, which wasn't affected by ice. It's the only way you could get supplies to Russia all year round. The trouble is,
Always the trouble with Russia. Can't get a warm water port.
Get supplies to Russia all year round. The trouble is, these straits were heavily defended by Turkish guns and forts like this one here. So, in February and March, but mainly in the middle of March 1915, the Allies launched a major naval offensive to try and push through the Narrows right here. You can see it all from there's a wonderful bit of high ground. You can see it all from up here. You've got the straits of the Dardanelles, all those ships going through. The British tried to force those straits with naval fleet alone. It didn't work. That was in March 1915. So 6 weeks later, they decided to land troops on this peninsula. Can you see this surrounded on both sides by water? And then advance towards Istanbul and get rid of the obstacles to allow the ships to go through the straits. It was disaster. It was an absolute byword for failure and stalemates, symbolising all that was worst about the First World War. Right at the southern tip of the peninsula there, the British landed on this day 100 years ago, and at Anzac Cove just up there was further landings. That would become immortalised. The Anzacs, the Australians, New Zealanders landing there. They thought this high ground they might seize on the first day. They did not seize this for 8 months. They'd never seized this at all. They hardly got away from those initial beaches. There was terrible bloodshed, and it was the beginning of stalemate. This was one of the beaches that was attacked on the very bottom end of the Gallipoli Peninsula. This was V Beach, codenamed V Beach. Up here where I'm staying now, this is where the Turkish
Beautiful.
soldiers were ready and waiting. They were dug in V Beach. Up here where I'm staying now, this is where the Turkish soldiers were ready and waiting. They were dug in pre-prepared trenches and positions up here. They were also dug into that fort there, which meant that when the British troops landed here in rowing boats, being towed by steam tugs and things like that, very primitive landing force, when they landed, they were under a brutal crossfire from riflemen up here and over there, and the result was absolute slaughter.
Yikes, that's terrible for landing.
Well, I'm now on V Beach, and it's 6 a.m. on the 25th of April 1915. This is where the British troops came ashore. It was not a well-organised big D-Day.
Can I ask you guys a question? You know, like in Saving Private Ryan, you know how like they would Hitler or Rommel or Hitler, the Germans in World War II, Nazis, had a bunch of defenses in the water on D-Day, and there were those like X-shaped or like X-shaped steel things in the water. Were those designed so that like how did that necessarily keep ships from? I mean, if anything, the soldiers just have to get out. Do you know what I'm talking about? Just like what were the point of those steel X things in the water?
D-Day style invasion with specialist landing craft. It was not a well-organised big D-Day style invasion with specialist landing craft. This was basic stuff. And there was one vessel they were hoping to use. More than 2,000 men were aboard a so-called Trojan horse. It was an old collier, freighter carrying coal stuffed with soldiers. It was called the SS River Clyde. And it came in just behind me now, and it grounded itself out there. The problem is it grounded itself in water that was too deep. The soldiers couldn't really get off. They risked drowning if they clambered off, but they were now grounded, immovable, underneath a vicious crossfire of riflemen in the high ground above that way, the Turkish trenches up there, and the Turkish troops manning that fort and the high ground up there. So they had a vicious choice. As the gangplanks went down, they either ploughed off into the water, drowned under the weight of their own kit, or they were picked off by Turkish sharpshooters. Soon this beach was an absolute sight of carnage. We're told that the water here at the side of the shore in the shallows was red, running red with British blood. Two units particularly involved were the unit from Hampshire and the Dublin Fusiliers, and they both took extraordinary casualties that day. It took them...
It almost felt really disrespectful for me to like crack my back while listening
side
to that.
Of the shore. It's particularly involved with the unit from Hampshire and the Dublin Fusiliers, and they both took extraordinary casualties that day. It took them, the ones that survived managed to hide along this little ridge, this little sandbank here on the edge of the beach, and it was not for another day that they managed to get off this beach. They did not secure this village for another 24 hours. So for 24 hours they were packed on here into this absolute killing ground. It was a shocking start to a terrible campaign. This is W Beach, just round the headland from V Beach there, and the slaughter, the levels of carnage were fairly similar. Here, the Lancashire Fusiliers stormed ashore. They ended up wading through rolls of underwater barbed wire that in place there by the Turks. They were attacked from up there, up on the cliffs, by Turkish marksmen. They staggered ashore. They did manage to push inshore a bit here, and through acts of extraordinary bravery, and despite taking terrible casualties, they managed to establish a toehold here. It was said at the time, it was widely reported at the time, they managed to win 6 VCs, 6 Victoria Crosses, before breakfast.
Timeline, Victoria Cross, and The Greatest Raid of All Time, 2 of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Highly recommend watching them.
Anzac Cove, Gallipoli. I've seen a lot of battlefields, but I don't think I've ever seen anything that quite compares to this. You couldn't find a place less suited to
an invasion.
Massive amphibious assault in an era of industrial warfare. The troops weren't supposed to land here. They got lost in the dark and ended up on the wrong beach. The units were intermixed. They had to advance up this extraordinary ravine, up these ridges, up these cliffs, with Turkish troops shooting down on them. The result was spectacular casualties. Thanks to the outstanding bravery of the Australian New Zealanders involved, they did reach some of this high ground, but they were
crazy,
unable to push beyond this beachhead and spend...
I mean, look at that.
...months in these unimaginably cramped and confined situations.
Sorry, but regardless of any like booby-trapped mines or barbed wire or ditch, whatever, even if none of that is factored in, and you just have the guys with guns and artillery, just look at what you have to climb.
It's a beautiful place, but it's one full of terror for thousands of men 100 years ago. The campaign was a total failure for the Allies. They were forced to evacuate 8 months after these initial landings, and Turkey remained in the war on their enemy's side. Around 500,000 men in all were killed or wounded. Around half
Anzac Australian and New Zealand Army
a million
Corps.
men in all were killed.
1st Australian Division, New Zealand and Australian Division, 13th Division, 2nd Australian Division, 1st Naval Brigade, RND, 3rd
Killed
Royal
or
Marine,
wounded.
BDE, RND, 29th Infantry Brigade, 29th Indian Infantry Brigade. I didn't hear the casualties.
Men in all in the war on their enemy's side. Around 500,000 men in all were killed or wounded.
Wait, what?
Total failure for the Allies. Years ago. The campaign was a total failure for the Allies. They were forced to evacuate 8 months after these initial landings, and Turkey remained in the war on their enemy's side. Around 500,000 men in all were killed or wounded.
In the Gallipoli landings? In the Gallipoli campaign? Am I an idiot that I missed something? On both sides? Insane, incredible. So much respect. These men are insane. Yeah, I'm going to continue watching these great documentaries from History Hit. See you guys next time.